I feel privileged tonight to be in your community, so thank you to all of you. What I'm going to do tonight is actually take you on my journey. My journey really was, I suppose, starting thinking in my life that God was a punishing God. Through suffering and through pain, to finding a God who was loving and a healing God. So I asked myself the question, who is God for me? And who am I for God? The answer I feel is, who God is for me goes through the stages of development, linked to my own development as a person. God is always on the search for us, more so than we are on the search for Him. I was born into a Roman Catholic family. Both my parents, weekly mass goers, First Fridays, monthly confession, and evening rosary. I would have attended all with my parents. I would always been brought up to believe, to obey the commandments. And always brought up to believe that if you did not, you were being punished. Roman Catholic count this fear as one of the 7 gifts of the Holy Spirit. Or as Proverbs 1, the fear of the Lord is called the beginning or the foundation of wisdom. The Catholic Encyclopedia explains that this gift fills us with a sovereign respect for God and makes us dread all things not to offend Him. I was the eldest of 6. I had 2 sisters and 3 brothers. I've always felt there was an expectation to give good example. We had a very happy childhood, lived on a farm, we had plenty of freedom, although we did not appreciate it. We were given plenty of chores, and when I look back on it now, I feel I was very fortunate. We were never short of anything, but never given too much. Having lived with my parents and siblings up to the age of 12, I was then sent to boarding school. It was my first big challenge in life. I was away from home. I was very lonely, I was meeting new people, and I found it very, very hard. God was still part of my life. I still got up at morning school to go to Mass at 7 o'clock. I prayed, but I was praying to be taken home, pleading with God, but still being fearful of the fact that I was to obey my parents and do what they wanted for me, and they were making concessions for me by sending me to boarding school. And always fearful of the fact if I don't obey God, that I was going to be punished. Thank God I made wonderful friends there. I left boarding school and went on to train as a nurse. Again, meeting wonderful friends. Towards the end of my training, I met my husband to be John. I continued on with my career, doing different courses and still attending Mass. I was not saying the rosary or going to confession as frequently now. I married John some years later and had 3 children and 2 miscarriages. My parents were still alive and in good health. I continued to work, which I enjoyed, and found it not easy to be juggling work with home life. But I survived, and each and every one of us know how difficult that can be. We attended Mass as a family. Things started to change in the early 1990s. Near relatives got sick and died, and then my mother got cancer. Suffered a lot before her death and died 9 months later. I felt why had she died so young? She was still only in her 60s. I felt I not alone lost my mother, but I lost a very good friend, and I was also losing my home. I also felt very wrought, because I always had this idea that I was going to look after my mother in her old age. 2 years later, my father died, which left bigger changes. The home we grew up in was no longer our home, so there was a bigger void in my life. Then the millennium came. We celebrated it as every one of us did. My sister Bernie, who was 13 months younger than me, and who would always have been regarded as the religious one in our family, always reminded me that my life was too good. If I did not suffer in this life, I certainly would be suffering in the next, which I really never believed to her. But on March the 8th, 2000, Bernie called to my home with a birthday present for me. She was on her way to hospital to have x-rays, as she had been experiencing chest pain. She rang me a few days later to say that she had been asked to come into hospital as there was and she needed to have it investigated. I was working in the same hospital and was on duty the day her scanning report came back. To this day, I will never forget what I was reading. My sister, who was 13 months younger and in her early 40s, had terminal cancer. She was to have radiotherapy for pain relief only. I remember being with the consultant when the news was being given to her. And as the consultant approached her bed, she said, "You needn't bother telling me. I know I have a tumour." To this day, I still think of the composure she had. Where did she get her strength? Her faith sustained her right through her illness. That's not to say that she did not bargain with God. She had 2 teenage sons at home, but it was certainly a crossroads in my life. Then I think of Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. They came to a small estate. Jesus said to his disciples, "Stay here while I pray." Then he took Peter, James and John with him. And a sudden fear came over him, and a great distress. And he said to them, "My soul is sorrowful to the point of death. Wait here and keep awake." And going on a little further, he threw himself on the ground and prayed that if it was possible, this hour might pass him by. "Abba, Father," he said, "everything is possible to you. Take this cup away from me, but let it be as you, not what I would have." My sister of 42 is dying of cancer. She's younger than me. Why is she not angry? Why is she still saying her prayers? Where is God? What are the boys going to do without her? And it certainly brought my own mortality to the surface. Although I worked in hospitals all my entire life, it never really occurred to me that somebody as young could be dying. And especially if this happened to other people, it wasn't to happen to our family. So I go back to Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane and he said, "Abba, Father, everything is possible for you." In his human form, he prayed and prayed and prayed. And on the 3rd time, he came back to Peter, James and John. "It's all over. The hour has come." His acceptance, his will to do what the Father asked for him. During Bernie's illness, she not alone coped with her cancer, she also prepared her son so much for when she would not be there. Her pain was never relieved. She acted as counsellor to many persons, and so we were all left with legacies of her wisdom and an understanding of a higher presence. Eileen, the youngest in our family, and myself were asked by her to go and get cards for all the occasions in her son's lives that she would not be there for. She wanted to have them written. The cards were given to me to pass on the appropriate occasions. I found myself very angry when 5 days before her death she got a stroke and was not able to speak. Why had God to do this to her? She was going to die, why not leave her speech? She died on August 3rd, 2000. I find I needed to find meaning in life. It made me realise my fate was so superficial. I had no relationship with God. I was doing what I always did and had no clue as to why I was doing it. In reading Finbar Lynch's book, When You Pray, I came across a saying, "In everyone there is a zone of solitude that no human intimacy can fill. It is there that God encounters us. Here in the hollow of our being, we discover the risen Christ." I, by chance, saw that a course in modern and moral theology was starting in Mary Island, Limerick. I decided to do it due to the fact of where I worked. I felt it would be a benefit to me. I loved it, and then during the course I realised I was going to get 30 credits and I would get a certificate somewhere along the line in theology. Then, on the 13th of April 2002, my eldest child and only daughter was killed in a car accident. I never experienced such physical pain in my life. I now know that physical pain was all the emotional, psychological and spiritual trauma I was experiencing. I was shattered once more, very angry, blaming God for letting something like that happen. It was God's fault. As far as I was concerned, although we still went to Mass as a family. When, after my daughter died, you can never have a family, unfortunately, but my husband and 2 sons and myself. I remember a cousin of my father's, coming home from California. He was a priest, came to visit me, and during the evening, in a course of conversation, he said to me, "We never think of human error." I did not want to hear about it. As far as I was concerned, it was much easier to blame God. But his words remained with me. When I was able to be rational again and realised it was human error on the night. One night at home, the Bible was on a shelf and I had been using it for references for the theology course that I was doing. I decided to open it at random, and it opened Ecclesiastes 2, which is about death. But there is a season for everything, a time for every occupation under heaven, a time for giving birth, a time for planting, a time for uprooting which has been planted, a time for killing, a time for healing, a time for knocking down, a time for building, a time for tears, a time for laughter, a time for mourning, a time for throwing stones away, a time for gathering them up, and a time for embracing, a time to refrain from embracing, and a time for searching, and so on it goes. I found myself opening it over and over again, and it gave me great peace. I would go as far as to say it was my Saviour. It was like as if God whispered to me, "Open wide your hand, and I will walk with you." I went back to work a few months later, started back to college to continue the theology course. I found myself getting to know God in a very different way. I started having a relationship with him, seeing him as someone I could talk to and who listened to me. I may not get the answers I wanted, but I found out how pain and suffering changed me into a deeper sense, seeing God as a friend and a loving God rather than a punishing God. I was lucky to be offered a counselling course during that time I was doing the theology. I loved it, and I found out a lot about Mary, and I found a lot I did not know about myself. I again reached a crossroads in what I was going to do. I felt I had come to the end of my nursing career, and I was very unsettled. I was answered when somebody said to me, "Mary, will you put it into the hands of the Lord?" One night in my counselling class, my counsellor challenged me because I couldn't make up my mind what I was going to do, and she said, "Is this the end of it so, Mary, for you?" And I suppose part of me felt when I was challenged, well, I'm not going to let her get away with the fact that I'm not going to have something prepared for the next night. So having worked in hospitals all my entire life, I felt the need for pastoral counsellors. I went about checking it out and what I needed to do. Having at this stage a diploma in theology, doing the pastoral care counselling course was the next step for me. Getting my accreditation, then to find employment in chaplaincy. I was very fortunate to get a job, although I feel it's very wrong in saying it's a job. It gives me so much satisfaction. I feel very privileged to be allowed in to the sacred space of each person I encounter, now knowing I'm meeting Jesus in every encounter. Through their suffering and pain, how they find Jesus, that Jesus was in us all, that Jesus waiting for us to reach out and ask for a relationship with him. Our lives of today are so busy, so full of going and doing. Have we time to stop, to be quiet, stay in silence for a short time? It's in the silence of our being that we hear what Jesus is saying to us. In Matthew 6, verse 6, he speaks of entering a room, shutting the door, and then finding my Father waiting there for me. The room is our heart, my innermost self, the real me. The door, the prayer, is a meeting in the present moment, shutting the door on the past and in the future. So I'm fully present in the present. My Father is waiting for me. I can be real. I don't need to wear the mask. He is coming to me for his son or his daughter. Prayer is about coming home to me and to my Father. It's like anything in life. We must want to want it. When Jesus speaks in the parable of the seed, landing in different grounds, In Luke 8, we can hide from our deeper longing for God. We can misinterpret its meaning, turn elsewhere for satisfaction. We can stay superficial, but it will not go away. It is waiting to be heard. How often, when patients are very ill, they are able to source that love that they have. Is Jesus that lives within them. So we love what He's love, pray what His prayer, the prayer that He has given us, forgive with His forgiving heart, are patient with His patience, and we carry our cross alongside Him to meet with Him there. This is where He wants to bring us. It is the flowering of the grace of our baptism. So the grace and the peace that we receive at the end of life, it's God's gift to us. It's a lifelong journey. I just want to conclude with a reflection. I'm sure that a lot of you are very familiar with it. Footprints in the sand. One night I dreamed a dream. As I was walking along the beach with my Lord, across the dark sky flashed scenes of my life. For each scene I noticed 2 sets of footprints in the sand, one belonging to me and one to my Lord. After the last scene of my life flashed before me, I looked back at the footprints in the sand. I noticed that at many times along the path of my life, especially at the very lowest and saddest times, there was only one set of footprints. This really troubled me, so I asked the Lord about it. Lord, you said once I decided to follow you, you'd walk with me all the way. But I noticed that during the saddest and most troublesome times of my life, there was only one set of footprints. I don't understand why. When I needed you most, you would leave me. He whispered, my precious child, I love you and will never leave you. Never, ever, during your trials and testings. When you saw only one set of footprints, it was then that I carried you. Thank you.